Geoff, may I call you Geoff?
Yes, absolutely. Golf is the only thing in golf that doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the person playing.
Is this man a one-time winner on the PGA Tour?
The point, Alan, is he didn't go Hollywood.
You need a fourth? Before we get to the episode, we should tip our caps to Echo, our corporate sponsors here. And of course, Lydia Ko, the new world number one, is a longtime Echo ambassador. Michael, do you know my affection for Lydia?
I share it. Just a charming person and an outstanding golfer. You know her far better than I. What can you tell us about her?
Well, I still have her hat from the Olympics in Rio. It was this gorgeous New Zealand hat, and I asked her if I could keep it. And she said yes. But one time I was talking to her, I said, "Where does your power come from?" She says, "It's from the ground," which is like a really old school thought. And she has beautiful footwork. And I always watch her swing the club, and she's dancing. And as I'm observing this, I always notice her Echo Biome shoes. Like they seem to give her superpowers. Have you observed anything along those lines?
Well, you know what the great teachers say. There's only one thing that connects you to the ground in this game, and that's they don't say your Echo shoes, but in this case, it is her Echo shoes. So that's pretty cool.
The secret to Lydia Ko's success, along with many other talents, but she's wearing the right footwear. So, all right, back to Need a Fourth.
I think it's appropriate that just a minute ago, Geoff Ogilvy, my distinguished colleague, and I observed Alan Shipnuck fixing his hair because many people would say that our next guest has one of the great heads of hair in all of golf. Shipnuck's on the short list. Robert Rock. Geoff, you ever played with Robert Rock?
Robert Rock's got fantastic hair.
Fantastic hair. How's his golf game?
Probably the most admired golf swing on tour, actually. Robert Rock is a fantastic golf swing, and he's the man to go to for questions about technique. But his hair is probably better than his swing.
He's got fabulous. Our guest has fabulous hair, but I don't want you to try to guess it just on that basis, because I want to say this about our guest first. So I was at the father-son event last year, and Raj was there, the course whisperer. Alan, can you help us out? Who's the course whisperer?
Roger Maltby.
Roger Maltby. And I said to Raj, the course whisperer, Trevino was there, does anybody know more about the golf swing than Trevino? And Raj, like a lot of professional golfers, super precise. And he said, I would say that nobody knows more about his or her own swing than Buck Trevino knows about his own swing. And I thought that was a very nuanced answer. But our guest today, and then we'll really open it up for you guys to identify the guest, is absolutely on the short list of the 6 people in the world who are the most knowledgeable about the golf swing. Anyone care to try on that basis? Hair, knowledgeable about the golf swing.
It's not Ledbetter. He never takes his hat off. Butch Harmon's bald.
Mac O'Grady.
Oh my God!
Mac O'Grady had a great head of hair back in the day, but I haven't seen it since the 80s.
Actually, O'Grady's hair is Bamberger-esque. Now that I think about it, yeah.
No, he had. Okay.
Is this man a one-time winner on the PGA Tour?
This man is a winner in life and on the PGA Tour. This man warmed. Geoff, you've played multiple rounds of golf with this guy. This distinguished guest of ours, although I don't know that for sure, but I don't know how that could not be possible. And he warmed up next to Tiger Woods at the 2000 U.S. Open on the Pebble Beach course, and he was trying to do his own thing. He was in the field, and like any of us, he couldn't stop looking. And he said to himself, "Then this guy's going to win by 15." Oh, that's another quality of this guest of ours. He's good at predicting things. Often based on statistical analysis. He has a great head for the golf swing. He's got a great head of hair, and he's got a great head for statistical analysis.
I'm going to say Brandel Chamblee.
Geoff, are you going to second that?
Brandel does have good hair.
Is he super knowledgeable about the golf swing?
Well, he seems to be.
Our guest today is Brandel Chamblee. Come on in, Brandel.
Yes, Brandel.
Brandon,
There he is, the hair
Did
himself.
you hear any of that preamble?
No, I was being kept in the dark, I think, on purpose. So
So it's probably best. It's probably best.
Sorry, I missed it.
Probably for
I'll
the
have to-
better.
I'll have to tune in. It's a pleasure to join you guys, Geoff, Alan, Michael. How are you guys? Where are you guys? All over the world?
Alan's in Northern California, just down under. I'm in Philadelphia. Where are you, Brandel?
I'm in Scottsdale. I'm home I've been home for the last 2 weeks or so, something like that, but I leave tomorrow to head to the East Coast, which is a common occurrence these days for me since Golf Channel moved to Connecticut.
I'm deeply curious how many books on your bookcase in the background is in the same bookcase behind Michael. I want it's for another time. We'll have to sort that out, but there's got to be a few that you both have on those sagging shelves.
It's funny. I got some of Michael's behind me. I know that.
I got some of Brandel's.
I got. There you go. It didn't take long to find one of Michael's.
Hey, nice.
The Second Life of Tiger Woods.
Yeah, that got dated really fast. Geoff, how often have you played with Brandel?
I don't know, Brandel. It's obviously been a long time. Did we play?
We must have. I looked. You turned pro in 1998. Is that correct? Something like that. And so,
yeah,
you straight away got onto the European tour. But I think you made your way to the PGA Tour, like 2000, 2001, something like that.
Yeah, I got through Q School at the end of 2000. Started in 2001. Yeah, you were still definitely out there at that point, right?
Yeah, I didn't leave. Well, I wasn't around for much longer after that. So 2002 was the last year I was fully exempt. And then in 2003, I played a little on the tour, but mostly I was doing television by then. But I remember hearing about Geoff really first from, of course I would have seen you or maybe played with you or something, but really hearing about Geoff from Gary McCord. I guess he was a frequent partner of yours at Greyhawk, or not at Greyhawk, Whisper Rock. I don't know, 2003, 4, 5, somewhere in there. You would have been a member. When did you join Whisper Rock?
I joined Whisper Rock, I think, towards the end of 2002, I think. And I play with Magic almost every day, I think, there for a while, which I don't know if, I think there's benefits to your golf education and some hindrance there as well.
I tell you what, he's got a damn good record at telling me who's going to be awesome. In addition to you, which he sang your praises long before you won the U.S. Open. He was like, you got to watch this guy. What was it? He said he hits at 9 miles, he hits straight up in the air, and he's got a great touch. I was like, okay, all those things work. Another time I was on a plane flying to Pebble Beach, Alan, and Gary McCord was sitting behind me. And now Gary and I have gotten along great forever. I mean, we've been buds forever. I did a lot of hiking with Gary. I've spent a lot of time with Gary, and I just love him. I've argued I think he's one of the 50 best things that's happened to golf in the last 50 years many times. I think I even wrote that once. But anyway, he sat behind me, and he just won't leave me alone, And he's like, "No, you got to see this guy swing. You got to see this guy swing." And he comes up, and now the entire front of the plane is interested in this guy's golf swing. And it was Bryson DeChambeau's golf swing when he was a senior or junior at SMU, and it was the first time I'd ever seen it. And he was like, "No, he really does. He swings on one plane. You got to see this. It's Mo Norman. It's blah blah blah." And we're drawing lines and we're doing all this stuff. And then in a blink of an eye, I was playing in the straight down event. And Bryson was in the event. And I had raged against the golf machine for years. And I was so curious because he was the first guy to come along, at least in my view, and adopt ideas from the golf machine, who I would say was better off because of that. Now, obviously, that's open to debate, but that's my view. And so I was curious how he did it. So in the locker room, I was like, holy hell, wait a minute. You don't swing anything like all these guys who adopt a golf machine philosophies. And he goes, well, that's because I've got my own view, and there's a million of them in there. And off he goes. And I don't know that I said another word for an hour and a half. And off he went. Now, this is before he ever hit a shot on the PGA Tour. So anyway, that was a Gary McCord, watch out for this guy, spot on, dead ringer call by Gary. So I diverge. We get back to Geoff Ogilvy. And I think my favorite Geoff Ogilvy story, and Geoff, you can tell me this is true because I've told this story before, and hell if I even know it's true, but I'm from Texas, and I rarely do you let facts get into the way of a great story, but I hope it's true. And that the year you won the U.S. Open, you played in the club championship at Whisper Rock and did not win. Is that story true?
True story. Yeah, I never won the club championship at Whisper Rock. I think I probably played it 4 or 5 times, and that might be the hardest tournament to win in the world. I think club championship at Whisper Rock. I mean, there's club golfers there who beat tour players regularly.
That's outstanding. That cracks me up. Who beat you? Who beat you? You won the national championship of our country, one of the 4 majors, and you couldn't win your damn club championship. Who beat you? Strickland?
A few guys won that when I played. I mean, Jim Strickland, Stricky?
Oh, I love Stricky. Stricky was my partner.
Played Arizona State with Phil.
Yeah, he was my partner at Straight Down. Yeah.
Oh, was he? Yeah. Todd Dempsey won it a couple of times, I think, early days.
Yeah. Dempsey could go.
Yeah, tour player. Never managed it. It was tough. I mean, you've got probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 tour guys play it every year, and you've got 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 other guys who have sort of ASU golfers, sort of failed pros, but they still find themselves into jobs where they don't have to work and they just play golf every day. It's an incredibly high standard.
Isn't there one day where they set I don't think it's a club championship. I think it's something else where they set the pins in crazy spots and the greens are at 15. It's tipped out. It's like hell day or something. What is that, Geoff?
It's the battle of attrition.
Yeah.
And they set the course up as ridiculous as they can. Yeah. And it's supposed to be a joke, but it's kind of fun for the good players. I mean, if you break 80, it's tougher than Oakmont set up tough. It's like out of control, difficult. And every now and then some pro somehow manages to keep it under the hole all day and shoot 71 or something, but most guys are shooting high 70s and 80s. And this is a course where we're kind of pretty regularly shooting in the 60s. So, but then they have the obverse to that. On St. Patrick's Day, they play the green tee, where we all go to the very, very max forward tees and just drive it at every par 4 green, and we try to shoot in the 50s and stuff. So they give us a day where it's the hardest it can be and the day where it's the easiest it can be. And they're kind of the funnest days of the year. So good fun.
Yeah, they don't have a problem finding fun at Whisper Rock. Alan, I got to say, you look like you're Henry David Thoreau or something there in that house. You look like did you build that house yourself? Or are you like, you're just sitting in there with a chair and a table and that's it? It's like this austere lifestyle.
This is an old house from the 1920s in Carmel. And the guy who basically built it, that's his kayak, and it lights up at night. There's over my right shoulder, it illuminates, and it was a seaworthy vessel. It's hard to imagine. And then these are lights that were fishing baskets, have been repurposed. And there's a hanging light. It was the spine of a primitive windsurfer, but it's made of wood. I mean, it's really beautiful. So there's all the old Carmel stone fireplace. So it's got some character. But yeah, I know there's a lot of jokes because I don't even really. The thing about social media, you have to really sweep the background. You have to think carefully about anything that's in the view of the trolls, because they will pick up on the most random items that you don't even notice. And so, yeah, there's always a lot of jokes about the boathouse, but
right. They'll screenshot and then zoom in.
Oh yeah. No, they're crazy. I know.
And then try to cancel you for something you have in your background.
Yeah.
Brand, I thought you were going to make the observation that Shipnuck was at a retreat for the Jewish Theological Seminary gathering of rabbis somewhere in the California Redwoods, because he's looking more and more like Rabbi Bamberger every year here. But it's all good. I like to brag about, and I do this periodically, Brandel, and one could easily do it of you and not too many other people who have won on tour. Mr. Ogilvy just dropped a word that I've never in my life used once, obverse.
Did I use it in the right context? Did I use it right?
I'm sure it was
correctly?
Perfect. Brandel, I'm going to send you at some point, and Brandel's a very talented, I mean, of course, one of the great keen observers of the modern day golf life there is. But Brandel, you'll love to see this. Shipnuck and I were on with Geoff shortly before the Open on the old course, and we just asked him, what do you think of the course? And he went on for about, I don't know, Alan, would you say 2.5 minutes?
Oh, no, I found it was longer than that.
Much longer than that. And Brandon, you could just insert a couple semicolons here and there and just run it in Sports Illustrated tomorrow. It was such a beautiful statement on what the old course is.
If I could pay Geoff a compliment, every time I read Geoff, I think it's hard to believe that guy got that good at golf, because it looks like he spent that much time writing. So you're a wonderful writer. Obviously, you're very smart. So, often the conversation in golf TV circles is who would make a great commentator or analyst. They're on the constant lookout. But your name's always at the top of the list. So I'm sure you're still ready to play, and you're still gonna keep playing and all that. But there's a career waiting for you out there talking about golf, for sure, and writing about it.
I still wake up thinking about hitting golf shots, not watching golf shots. So
It's really, really hard to kill that bug. I get it. I hit golf balls. My wife and I played the last 3 days, and then I went out and hit. She took off to play. She's with a group of girls playing Pinehurst today, but I went out and hit golf balls today. I'm 60 years old, and I'm thinking about going to Q school in December. The bug never leaves you. It doesn't. You have a couple of good rounds, and I think, oh yeah, I got it. And these days at 60, getting it really is just when you wake up and your back doesn't hurt, your elbows don't hurt, your wrists don't hurt, and I think, oh well, hell, I can still play this game. The bug never leaves you.
So tell me, do you think? I mean, you've obviously analysed the golf swing a lot, thought about it, and messed around with it, and observed a lot the last 20 or 30 years. Do you think if you had your young man's body now with what you know, you would have been better?
Yes, absolutely. I do, Geoff. Because I didn't know enough when I was 20, 21, 22. And I'm not faulting the instructors that I worked with. But there was no such thing as YouTube. There was no way to check their information. They were on the cover of a golf magazine. So whatever they said, you thought was gospel. But if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, I would say, well, hold on a second. Whoever did it that way? And the way I'm doing it is how Tom Watson did it, and how Jack Nicklaus did it, and how Bobby Jones did it, and how Ben Hogan did it. And I would say, with all due respect, I think you're wrong. I didn't do that. I said, you must know what you're talking about. Your name's everywhere. And so I listened to them. I was curious, and I enjoy golf instructors. I enjoy sitting around and talking about philosophy. So I slowly adopted those philosophies to the extent that I could no longer find my way back home again. In college, I can remember one time being asked, why are you so good? And I was very good. And I thought, well, gosh, I hit it high, and very few people can hit it past me. That's a pretty good place to start. And I couldn't sniff saying that when I played the tour. I mean, I think the longest I ever was on tour was, I think I cracked the top 10 in driving distance top 50 in driving distance 1 year. But otherwise I was, on the shorter end of the scale, 75th or something, or 100th. And so slowly but surely my horsepower left me. So yeah, I definitely do. I just didn't have enough confidence in my swing thought. There was a very, if I can say this, not a particularly popular movie. It didn't get seen that often, but a friend of mine wrote it, called 7 Days in Utopia. Dave Cook is a sports psychologist, golf psychologist, a very religious guy. He wrote that book, and it's based loosely, in fact, because there was a character that it was based around, a teacher from Waco, Texas, sort of a different version of Harvey Pinnock. But anyway, the genesis, the gist of the book is that this broken down tour pro car breaks down in this small town, and he goes to see this tour pro because he's got nothing to do. He's stuck in the town for a week, and the golf professional tells him, he asks him, "Why do you grip the club the way you do?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." And the golf professional looks at him incredulously and says, "Well, how could you not know an answer to that?" He goes, "Your homework tonight is to go home, and I want you to write 5 pages on why you grip the club the way you do." And he was like, gracious. So, the movie, the scene goes back, and he's up all night trying to figure it out, and writes it, and labors over it, gets it written, and comes out the next day, and he's really excited to give it to this teacher. And the teacher goes, "Well, I don't want it. And you throw that away." And he was like, "What are you talking about? I stayed up all night to write this." And he goes, "It wasn't for me. It's for you. Because when you get on tour and somebody tries to tell you to change your grip, you will now know why you grip it that way, and you'll be able to argue why you do. And so, I think having the confidence in your own ability and knowing why you swing the way you do is an invaluable tool, because, Geoff, there are a million different golf swings, as you well know, in the Hall of Fame. Cross the line, laid off, short, long, and everything in between. And trying to swing to some ideal is certainly not ideal, I would say.
Geoff, I want you to answer your own question, because I kind of feel like, having got to know you a lot this year, you might be better off if you could go back to being just young and dumb and unencumbered and have a free mind. Do you think that the games become easier or harder for you, irrespective of how your body's changed?
My story is a bit similar to Brandel, actually. I knew what I was doing when I was 10, I feel like. And gradually, but you go get a lesson from the guy who dad says, he's a great teacher. He teaches some good players. Listen to what he says. And you kind of listen to what he says and you do a little bit. And then you go on, and I got into like the system where I got the good coaching and stuff. And it seemed to make sense. And they'd put you on camera next to Faldo or Norman or someone who did it good back in the day. The video camera was pretty prevalent. And there was somewhere deep inside always that I'm like, you know what? I'm not sure about this, but I'll do it because these guys are supposed to know more than me, So I guess it's really, like Brandel just said, you have to sort of trust and believe in what you do. It's very difficult when you're a 15, 16-year-old kid and you're being told by these grown-ups who are on magazine covers and they've taught tournament winners and stuff. It's like, well, he must know more than me. I mean, maybe it'll feel better down the road, I'll do it now because there's this idea that you're not there yet, but if you do all these things and there's this ideal that you're always chasing this ideal, and it took me a really long time to realize there is no ideal. The secret to golf is hitting it well now, this shot that's in front of you, and then go to the next one and hit that shot really well. And the guy who adapts the best is the best golfer. The guy who can get up to the shot, just hit the best shot, and then walk up and work out how to hit that shot and hit that shot. This idea that gets planted in, well, at least it got planted in my head. And in, I think, the 80s, 90s, that video camera generation, that there was this ideal that you're chasing, and once you swing it like this, you're going to be a good player, and the ball will go where you want, is a flawed philosophy. I think the best golfer is the best self-teacher, and he knows how to hit the shot that's in front of him the best, because every shot's different. Every lie is different. Every day is different. Your body feels different every day. I mean, look, what do the scientists say? Every 6 or 7 years, you're a completely new person. All your cells are gone and you're rebuilt with something. I mean, you're completely new. You're more of a pattern than you are a thing as a human, so just work out how to manage that pattern the best and just hit the best shot you can when you get to the ball. And that's funnily enough what I did when I was a kid. Like, I didn't practice swing the night before I went to go and play a game with Dad when I was 12 about this is how I'm going to swing it the next day. I was just excited about the first tee shot off the first, and I'd hit that and I'd go, oh, look where that went. I'm going to go hit that, So I guess the long way around to get to the thing is, I wish I'd, exactly like Brandel said, sort of had the strength of mind or character to say, you know what, I know what I'm doing. I'm just going to play golf the way I want to play golf. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but this is me and I'm going to do it like this. That being said, I think the suffering that you deal with when you play tour golf and you work on stuff that's certainly not correct for you, but you bang your head against the wall so hard because we're all told you have to work really hard and you have to do this, and if you don't grind, you're not going to be any good. And I think every tour player has done that and created suffering for themselves. It's just an absolute mess in your mind, and it just creates all this stress and anxiety. The pot of gold is at the end of that rainbow. I mean, that's really what Hogan and Trevino did, is they just banged their head against the wall longer than everyone else until they got there, I'm glad I've sort of done that. I feel like I have a pretty good idea of how I play golf now. I still certainly can't do it every day, but I've got a pretty good idea of the way I should go about it. I just wish my body worked like it did when I was 20 again. But I'm not too old, and I still love playing golf, and I still love discovering every day. And every day I think I've worked it out. The next day it shows me that I haven't. And then I have to go a week or two before I sort of get the little, I've worked it out again, you know what I mean? And then golf shows me that I haven't. But that's the fun. I mean, that's the game. I think if there's anything that as I said, I wish I hadn't believed there was this ideal that I was going to get to. I wish I realized that it was just, you know what? work out how to play well every single day. Today, work out how to play well today. Worry about tomorrow, but today is today and play well today. So I think it's a fascinating subject. I mean, I could think and talk about the golf swing and playing golf and getting better at golf and having good scores forever, because I think you can't work it out. Somewhere inside us knows the answer, but the more you try to tell it the answer, the further away you get from the answer. I think that's the funnest part of the game.
Yeah, Geoff, was there, for me, there was, I think one shot that, at least when I was younger, that I always tried to hit, that just I think intuitively made me a better player. I would go to the range and I would try to hit, a couple of 100 1-irons, and I would try to hit them as high and as hard as I could. And it was that move really that made me, I think, made me a better player, made me a much, much better player. And then slowly I got coached out of all those moves as I began to listen to instruction, after I got really, really good. So it was kind of, I remember reading, maybe it was a Fred Couples, maybe it was a Jack Nicklaus. It was, Fred would talk about trying to get his hands as fast as he could on his left shoulder. And Jack would talk about, trying to get his hands to go down the target line. But anyway, I would try to do that. And if you think about what you have to do to hit a 1-iron high and long, you're releasing it fully, right? You're not a lot of forward shaft lean. You're swinging up, you're hitting it high. You're not thinking about technique. And that one thought, held me in such good stead. I'm wondering if you had like an epiphany, one moment when you were younger that allowed you to have a breakthrough in the game.
I don't know. I mean, I started really young. I mean, I was chipping ping pong balls around the house when I was 6 or 7. It's funny. I always gravitated as a really young kid, to the hardest shot possible. And I did, I'd have Dad had a set of, remember the Nicholas Muirfields, the blades, and back in those days, you'd get the 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way down. And he never used the 1-iron. He had the ping 1-iron, I think, which everyone wanted. But I would take that 1-iron and just go to the range and want to hit that. And it was an impossible club to hit, but I just loved hitting the hardest shot possible. I'd go into bunkers and hit bunker shots with 7-irons because I thought that was harder than it was with a sand wedge. I don't know if I had any actual specific moment of clarity. I used to like mimicking whoever was playing really well at the time. I'd go out and try to feel like I swung like that. And that, I think, was really good because it's feel based, it wasn't position based. I tried to look like Steve Elkington or look like Greg Norman, or I feel like what it feels like to be Greg Norman. And I think it taught me a lot about you find your sort of edges, from the science point of view. Bryson always talks about end range, but I think when you have a Lee Trevino week, and then you have a Nick Faldo week, and then you have a Tom Watson week, you're sort of discovering all the different things you can do with your golf swing. I lift my left heel for a week like Watson, and then you keep it on the ground like Faldo for a week. And I just think I found the boundaries, if that makes sense, in all the things that I couldn't do. And the end product was my golf swing, which was just a mismatch, like a sort of a cocktail of everything I'd ever tried to do, But I definitely, as a kid, gravitated to the hardest shot possible, which I think is really an interesting headspace, because the older you get, you kind of go the other way. You try to go to you try to practice the stuff you can do, and you kind of go away from the stuff you can't do. Absolutely. If I could find out what went wrong, my head, and I think you see it in other kids, and I see it in my kids. We've got the mental side of golf worked out when we're 10. Every bit of new information that we get further away from that pure sort of perfect sort of golfer. It's we think we're doing full pre-shot routines and visualization, all this. You just instinctively, naturally do that as a kid, and it's so much fun. And you don't worry about the shot you just hit before. You just get excited about the next one you want to hit. If I could do anything, I'd try to put my 12-year-old brain onto this wise old person, I guess. I don't know. But does it come? Can you gain all that experience and get all the scars and ever get back there? It's interesting.
I mean, the whole idea of having your own swing. A few years ago, when Dustin Johnson was clearly the best golfer in the world, I asked him if you couldn't touch a golf club for 1 year, how long would it take you to get back to where you are right now? And he said, well, could I work out and train? And I said, yeah, you can keep in good shape, whatever. He's like, a day, maybe two. And, Dustin's unique, but, for him, he's like, it's in him. It's who he is. He hasn't really changed his swing that much. And I always thought that was a fascinating answer. What about you guys? If you didn't touch a club for a year, but you could stay in fighting shape, like, is your swing now so hardwired into your nervous system that you could just find it right away? Or would it be a long process of rediscovery?
Oh, for me, I would hit the ball okay. It wouldn't take long to look really good to you guys, but the last 5% would take a while. It's quite hardwired, but I believe it about DJ, because DJ, there's two sorts of golfers, right? There's guys who try to hit it a certain way, and there's guys who try to swing it a certain way. And DJ is just a guy who tries to hit it a certain way. And I think the guys who try to hit it a certain way, he's thinking about the shot he's hitting, not about the swing he's making. So I think comes back quicker for a guy like that, especially such a great athlete. But there's other guys who, like Bryson, who's trying to swing it a certain way because he knows that's going to get the result he wants. And I think that guy needs to put the whole thing back together, before he hits the shots. I don't know. I'd be back reasonably quick, but the sharpness would take a long time to sharpen the pencil.
Yeah, look, all that work you've done your whole life, it counts. I don't know if you've ever read a book by his name was Daniel Coyle. He wrote The Talent Code. You ever read that book? Anybody? You ever guys ever read that?
I read that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating book, and it just talks about the myelination that goes on when you're learning something, and it. That counts, right? So, Hogan famously had that accident in February of 1949. And, almost exactly a year later, he tied at the LA Open. And he would have had 30, 45 days to practice before going to that LA Open. And he played no more than a handful of times the rest of his career, even through, the bulk of what was left of, you could call his flush career. Through 53, he was only playing a handful of times, and he still had the form. So yeah, all that work you've done in the past, it counts. That last 5%, as Geoff said, is being able to flight shots, hitting them through trajectories, carrying them the right distance. You'd have to go out there and play very conservative golf because you wouldn't be able to. Even if you've been working out, you wouldn't be able to clear as fast. You wouldn't be able to stretch as much. You wouldn't be able to swing, get your hands as high, or there would be loads of things you wouldn't be as sharp at. You just wouldn't be as good around the greens. Your touch wouldn't be as good. And that's that last 5% that Geoff's talking about. But yeah, I would be okay. I've actually gone a year and not touched a golf club in the last 15, 20 years. I went somewhere in there. I would have gone 2-3 years and hardly touched a golf club. I remember I hadn't played no tournament golf for 15 years, and my wife, and only like 3 or 4 rounds a year. And my wife was after me because the Senior Open was at St. Andrews, and she was like, don't you think that'd be cool to play one senior event? I was like, yeah. And the Open was at Carnoustie, and so I said, okay, I'll enter it. And then like 2 months went by, and I hadn't touched a club. I hadn't picked up a club. And one day I went in to brush my teeth, and there was a note on the mirror that said, it's 53 days till the Senior Open qualifying, and you haven't touched a club. And so I started laughing. I went out there, and she was like, listen, if you don't want to play, don't play. But if you're going to try to qualify, you should at least give it an effort. Because look, golf is so far down on my priority list now. I've got a million other things. I love golf. I absolutely love it, but it's 10th or 12th on my priority list. So I just always had other things to do. So I was like, all right, I'll go practice. And then, after a month, my body hurt like hell. I'd get up every morning and be like, holy, how did I do this? And I had calluses, and I was thinking about golf again. And, it's like, I'd come home pissed if I didn't play well or hit it well. And, but it was it was a fun few months, but it took a lot to get that last 5% that Geoff is talking about. I'm not sure I actually got it, but I did well enough to qualify. And that was fun. I'm grateful for having, given it sort of one last shot, so to speak.
Alan, to your point, I remember shortly after Nicklaus turned 50, but he didn't want to keep beating up on those guys that he'd been beating up on all his life. Thank you, Brandel, for remembering. And he was going bad himself, like for a 3-week stretch, let's say. And I said to Jack, if Jack Grout had died, a year or two earlier, I said, "What if Grout could watch you today? How long do you think it would?" And I can remember this like it was yesterday. It was at Terrell. I said, "If Grout were alive today, could watch, you guys could be on the range together. How long do you think it would take him to get you straight?" And Nicklaus went like this. He'd fix me and he went like that. And it was neat. It was a neat moment. And then when Geoff was talking about running from this, this instructor and the age of the video and all the rest, and Brandel, this is a long setup for something I'd love to hear you weigh in on. I would have thought, now Tiger was a prodigy. He had a beautiful swing even before he ever went and saw Butch. But he improved a lot under Butch. And now Butch, without knowing anything, Geoff, about who you would have seen at that age, or Brandel, you for that matter as well. When he went to see Butch had worked with Sluman, he won a major. Davis Love had won a major, worked with, of course, Greg Norman, who was the number one player in the world at the time that Tiger went to see him. So, to Geoff's point earlier, Tiger wasn't running around, and Earl wasn't going to let him run around. He was like, "This is your guy. This guy works with Norman, and now he's working with you." And of course, Norman got pushed out or left. So I don't think Tiger ever had that question of flavor of the month or let's look at this video. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we talk about the Tiger Butch era as such a magical period for golf and such a magical period for swinging the club beautifully. And Brandel, you and I talked about Tiger 2000 on the practice tee at Pebble Beach. But I wonder, Brandel, if you could offer your thoughts on that, about the alchemy or the chemistry is probably the word between Butch and Tiger.
I would say Tiger got very lucky there, in the same way that Jack Nicklaus got very lucky. When he went out to that range in 1950 at Scioto, there on that range to help him was Jack Grout. Now, Jack Grout, as I'm sure all of you well know, his tutelage in the game derives from Alex Morrison, and there's a direct link between the golf that Alex Morrison taught and Henry Picard played and Ben Hogan played, and to some extent Bobby Jones. And so, Jack Grout was taught by Alex Morrison, who taught rolling the heels, who taught lifting the left heel in the backswing, who taught turning the head to the right in the backswing and keeping your head to the right in the backswing, which allows that great separation. So in transition, and so there's Jack Grout, who had the best of both worlds. He was, I would say, lucky in his instruction and also came at it from a playing background. So there Jack Nicklaus is, a good athlete, and thankfully he ran into Jack Grout, who knew exactly what Jack Nicklaus needed to get heading in the right direction. Tiger, similarly, at least in Butch had a playing background and also sort of a highly technical background and being taught by his father. I'll give Butch a huge compliment in that none of his players look alike. None of them. They don't all swing flat. They don't all swing upright. They don't swing down the line. They swing across the line, lay it off. They have strong grips and weak grips. He worked with Freddie Couples and he worked with Jose Maria Olazabal. You can't get a weaker grip than Jose. You can't hardly get a stronger grip than Freddie. You can't get a flatter swing than Jose. You can't probably get a more upright swing than Freddie Couples. And he's worked with everything in between. So, let's imagine if Tiger's father, and I give Tiger's father a lot of credit because he knew the game, but what if he would have, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus here, but I think all of us can imagine him working with 2 or 3 or 4 other teachers who would have tried to impose upon Tiger a method, some methodology. And who knows if it would have stripped out of Tiger the genius that existed. I think, Butch is, he has told me that before he lets somebody come work under him, he makes them read like a prerequisite to working with Butch, or as learning from Butch. is them reading John Jacobs' book on golf swing to get just a basic underlying philosophy about how to grip it, how to stand, and all those things. And so I think Butch really is really rooted in the fundamentals, that he doesn't get tangled up in swinging a certain way. And so, golf is very fortunate that Tiger and Butch, or that Tiger met Butch and didn't meet somebody else who might have imposed some theory on him and robbed him of his genius.
It's an interesting thought exercise. What if they were teaching at the naval course in Cypress, California in 1982, the stack and tilt? Would we even ever heard of Tiger Woods? Like, I mean, it is that the happenstance, as you say, of what led certain players to certain places. Because you were talking about Bryson. When my first job when I was 16, I was a cart boy at Quail Lodge, this little course in Carmel Valley, and Ben Doyle was teaching there, and I had no real golf education, and Ben Doyle had this golf cart with all these contraptions, and he had kids out there. They were hitting beach balls with rakes all summer long, and I thought it was the weirdest shit I'd ever seen, and it was so over my head. And of course, Bobby Clampett became the ultimate Ben Doyle disciple, and never really achieved what people thought he was going to. And so yeah, it's like who you wind up with and how it all happens is a fascinating subject. And it's sort of unique to golf, right? Because no one really talks about like who LeBron James's high school coach was. In other sports, like you're this incredible physical talent and you just find a way, and there's people who help you or don't. But it seems like the cream always rises in other sports. But golf is very unique in that way. Like the people you meet on your journey seem to have an outsized effect on the athlete.
Yeah, we're all so obsessed with the golf swing, the mystery of it, the science of it, which is why the book, The Golf Machine, I think has intrigued people. I think that book was written in the late 60s because it at least promised, or at least promises the reader that you're going to be able to understand the golf swing after you read this book. Now, I've read that book a half a dozen times at least in my life. I've taken notes on it. I've broken it down. I've spent a lot of time trying to understand that book, and I still don't understand it. I've been to a few teaching seminars where huge proponents of that book stand up and take issue with me on that book, and I'm like, look, the reason I find so much fault in that book, not to get too much into the weeds here, but because it gets the simplest thing wrong. So how can I believe a book as complicated as that book when it gets the simplest thing wrong? Which I believe is very early on in that book, like page 12. It talks about how the head cannot move, that the golf swing must swing around a fixed point, and likens the golf swing to a machine in that regard. And, again, this is where if you had YouTube, when I was, standing on the range and, teachers were telling me to keep my head still, I would have taken them to the top 50 PGA Tour winners of all time and the top 50 LPGA winners of all time. And I would have pulled up all 50 of their swings and said, not one of these players keeps their head still. Not one. Not one. Not even close. Like they all move it huge, off the ball and up the ball, up off the ball, or off the ball and down. But they all move it in a big way, every single one of them. So why are you teaching that? It's just not based in fact. And so that's without getting too much in the weeds, that's it. And it's interesting that you talked about that, Alan, because I had, and again, I'm not going to name names and throw this fellow under the bus, but I had a very good junior player on my high school team. He has a lot to do with me even getting into golf. He was a tremendous player, and his father said to him, and his father hardly had any money, but he scraped up enough money. He said to his son, I will leave it up to you. I'll send you to see Bob Tosky or Ben Doyle. I'll spend all the money, and you can go for an entire summer and work with either one of these. And this young kid said, I'll go to Ben Doyle. And he was the number one player on our team, and he was borderline the number one player in the nation, junior player. And he came back from there and just, he just was never the player that he was. before he left. And so, again, I'm not throwing Ben Doyle under the bus. He was trying to help students. He was trying to understand the golf swing. But there's a danger in trying to impose a methodology on every single player that comes through your door. Generally speaking, teachers learn from athletes. They learn from them. It's not the other way around. Teachers generally don't innovate with an idea. It's when the movement is discovered. Like if we're looking at Kyle Berkshire with his movement. Okay, so he wasn't taught that. He came to that empirically. Nobody would teach what he does. That step up it goes, right? And so Bryson learned it from Kyle, and boom, transformed himself from never having a top 10 in a major championship to finishing fourth and then winning the U.S. Open, where Geoff Ogilvy won it at Winged Foot. And so, did Bryson learn that from a teacher, or did he learn that from an athlete? So it's usually the genius that innovates, and then teachers try to understand it and then help others understand it. And teaching, and there's a lot of great teaching out there, a lot. And I really have enjoyed teaching in the last 5-6 years, listening to teachers, because I think instruction's gotten miles better.
I think to be a really good teacher requires so much wisdom. And what comes to mind as I'm thinking about, and Brandel, help me with the name if you can remember, but the 14-year-old kid from China, who was 14 at the time, who made the cut at the Masters.
Wan Tianlong?
Thank you. And had an awkward swing, but at 14, he was good enough to make a cut in the Masters. And so I said to Billy Harmon, the next week, what would you do with this kid? And Billy Harmon, for those who don't know, is Butch's kid brother and son of Claude Harmon. And Billy said, nothing. And I said, really? He's got a weird looking swing. I mean, I was egging him on, obviously. And Billy said, yeah, he's 14. He just made the cut in the Masters. Let him figure it out. But I mean, another guy would be like, oh, we need to do this, this, and this, like to Geoff's point a minute ago. Brandon, a quick one and then a longer one. How about Percy Boomers on learning golf? Where would that be in your on your list, if anywhere?
I have it. It's somewhere back here. I love the book.
Oh, I'm sure you have it.
I love it. The turn in the barrel philosophy. Again, it's one of those philosophies that it's beautiful, it's wonderful, but it just doesn't work, and it's not true. Nobody turns in a barrel and plays this game great. Everybody moves off of the golf ball. But I love the book. I'll tell you a quick story about that. I was once working, and again, I don't want to throw instructors under the bus, but I was working with David Ledbetter. I'm not throwing David Ledbetter under the bus here.
When you're from Texas and you're a golf person, you got to be really careful with that word "bus" in general.
Okay, fair point. So I'm working with David Ledbetter, and one of David Ledbetter's acolytes comes out, and he says, "You're not going to believe this, and this will tell you how long ago it was. This fax that we just got from this very well-known teacher." And David goes, "Oh, this will be interesting." And he said, "Brandel, you got to come in and read this fax with me. These are always entertaining." So I go in there, and the fax reads something along the lines of, "How dare you use the word transition without giving me credit? I coined the phrase of the club, that space where the club's going into the backswing before, as it transitions from backswing to downswing. I coined that as the transition, and you should give me credit every time you use it." And so David went over to Percy Boomer's book, pulled out, and David found the spot where Percy Boomer used the word transition. Put it face down on the fax, closed the fax, sent a letter. Percy Boomer coined the word, and I'm sure somebody used it before Percy Boomer. So every time you use it, you should give him that. And I left there and I thought, wow, that is how petty instruction can be. I mean, the other fellow was a monster a monolith in the teaching industry. But anyway, that's a beautiful book. I love it, and I don't fault them. It's just like, it's a wonderful theory. It's another one of those theories like resist with your lower body so that you can build up tension and hit it farther. And those are wonderful theories. They're like, I likened it to the geocentric model of the universe. It's a wonderful theory. It sounds great. It's beautiful. It's just wrong. That's all there is to it.
Brandel, where were you situated when Geoff won the U.S. Open in 2006 on the Winged Foot course?
Let's see, where were we? I was. The thing is that I have to really work hard to watch the end of golf tournaments, if you can believe that, because normally we're sitting somewhere where we can take it all in, right? And then we have to get from there to our set, within 30 minutes before we go on the air. If we're coming on the air at 6 o'clock, at 5:30, we got to get there. And so in that last 30 minutes, a lot of crazy stuff happens typically. But typically you get up there and they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so made the putt and so-and-so didn't make the putt. And then you get my notes set and then I get locked in. Well, in the last hour of that tournament, all hell breaks loose. Geoff chips in for par at 17, gets the up and down at 18, and then everybody collapses. Colin Montgomery and Furyk and Phil. And so, I remember getting up to the set and I'm like, what? Who? He did what? And and at that point, the U.S. Open didn't have shot link. And so, trying to catch up and get ready to come on the air. And then you think, well, Phil's going to win anyway. And then he gets there and then that all unfolds. So, I was on the set trying to wrap my arms around it like the rest of the world. Phil was about to win 3 majors in a row. He had just won. What did he won? He won, so that's 2006. So had Phil won the 2005 PGA, he won the 2006 Masters. This was going to be his 3rd major in a row, which, by the way, cracks me up because as soon as he loses, he switches teachers because, he couldn't find the fairway or whatever. But meanwhile, he damn near won 3 majors in a row.
And then Tiger goes on an epic run, starting at Hoylake. I mean, it's incredible how the whole thing flipped. If Phil wins the Open at Winged Foot, he's 3/4 of the way to the Tiger Slam. He goes to number 1 for the first time ever. He's going to be Player of the Year for the first time. Like you could, for the first time, you could say with a straight face that he's an equal to Tiger Woods. And then one hole, everything changed, and Tiger's turned on the afterburners.
Right. I mean, that was, it was obviously a monumental moment for Geoff, but it was one of the more bizarre endings to a golf tournament. Great commentary by Johnny Miller. I think his comments were, he doesn't have to ride the white horse, something along those lines. He doesn't have to be the hero here. And of course, everybody watching sports loves to be, second guess the athlete. I've heard Phil give his take on that. Something about he would have hit a 4-wood, but he thought he was going to leave him too long a shot. And, he worked his whole way through it. But the amazing thing to me is, if I'm not mistaken, he had hit 2 fairways that day, standing on the 18th tee. And he had the dadgum lead in the U.S. Open. So that was quite the accomplishment from Phil, just to get it around that golf course from the right. It was a bit like Seve later in his career when he couldn't find a fairway, but just through guile and guts, managed to hang in there.
Geoff, you've never talked about this with Phil, have you? Like, you've never rapped out about that whole thing.
Not really. It's he was pretty good about it on the presentation. Like, he turned up to presentation. I don't think Monty did. He was pretty good about it. He looked white, like he was pretty in shock. And I actually, at the time, or very soon after that, for about the next sort of 2 or 3 years, I lived right next door to Bones. So we talked about it a few times. We didn't bring it up. We had a couple of little lighthearted cracks about it, me and Phil. I think I never wanted to bring it up. It's pretty sensitive. I mean, like Brandel said, it was nobody else could have been leading the US Open on the last hole, hitting it the way he was hitting it. There's just no way, not around there. Maybe not around anywhere, but it was just when you sort of afterwards you see what happened, it's like, well, there was probably a sense of inevitability about it because of his whole US Open sort of thing. It was a bit of the Sam Snead US Open history. But on the other hand, the whole week it felt like it was his tournament. As Brandel said, he's won 2 majors in a row. Tiger missed the cut, I think, for the first time in a major, maybe. As a pro, I think Earl had died just after the Masters, maybe. His father had passed. So it was a tough period. He turned up without any practice, so I don't think anybody held it against him. But it was like, as you said, Phil's time to shine, and he was sort of, it was his coronation, right? He was walking around New York. It was New York. They loved him. And it just wasn't meant to be. I mean, I don't begrudge the driver. I think the 18th at Winged Foot's always a driver. I don't understand the second shot. I never understood why he wouldn't just pitch it out. And I had driver 9 on him. If he'd pitched it 100 yards up the fairway, he would have had 80 yards, and that's Phil's wheelhouse. I don't understand that second shot, not really the drive. But anyway, it worked out well for me. It was so bizarre. Even at presentation, there was no screen like they have these days, or there was just a leaderboard on one side of the 18th green. I guess it's on the right-hand side. So we went to presentation. The whole green thought he'd made 5. They never saw that. They thought his second shot went into the back bunker, not his third shot. And so there's this whole one side of the thing saying, what are they all coming out for? Isn't there a playoff tomorrow? Because they didn't have a clue. So only half the 18th green spectators knew that it was over and the red carpet was coming out onto the green and stuff. So it was a fascinating period. I mean, everybody's stories about it are almost more fun than mine because there were so many different things that happened in the last hour, and I really only know from my perspective. I was just trying to make par on the last few holes and see how it worked. And I've watched it a few times. I haven't watched it too much, to be honest. I never really like watching my own golf tournaments back. I'd rather watch other people win tournaments, funnily enough. But fascinating times, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It kind of adds to the Mickelson lore a little bit, doesn't it? It's like that Snead story. I mean, how did he not manage to win one? He got so close so many times. He was arguably the best US Open player of my generation. He always seemed to be in it, just couldn't get it over the line.
Yeah, what a statement, right? I mean, if I'd have lost a lot of money on Phil finishing second, I've lost track. Has he finished second 6 times? I would have lost a lot of money on that. Now, I mean, I would argue some of that has to do with bizarre circumstances. I would argue, the graduated rough philosophy that the USGA adopted played into that. I would argue that the solid core golf ball had a lot to do with that because even the straightest of hitters ended up in the rough more often, and that's where Phil lived. So there were things that played into that, certainly, but just still the idea that if you listed the top 40 players of all time, Phil would either be 39th or 40th in terms of accuracy. In my book, I mean, it's Seve and Phil, and they're neck and neck. And I don't know who's the most inaccurate, and the fact that Phil could have easily won 3-4 U.S. Opens is crazy to me. But that speaks to Phil's unbelievable talent and belief. One of my favorite Phil Mickelson stories is his friends. You would know these guys, Geoff. Rob Mangini, right?
Yeah.
Rob Mangini, and of course, Alan. You would have talked to Rob Mangini when you were writing your book.
Here's a great source for my book.
Yeah, so I love Rob Mangini and Jim Strickland, and they're buds of mine. And Rob tells a story. I might have even told this story to you, Alan, but tells a story about they had hired all these great instructors. Geoff, this fits perfect with what we were just talking about earlier. They had hired all these great instructors to come in and work with the ASU team. I think it was Steve Loy. He got all these great instructors come in. We're going to have the best instruction for this team. And they get there and everybody's there but Phil. And so Steve Loy says to Mangini, go get Phil. He's on the back of the range back there. Go get him. It's mandatory. Tell him to get his ass up here. So Rob drives back there and he's like, hey, hop in the cart. We got to go. The guys are here. And he was like, I'm not going. He's like, there is not one thing those guys are going to tell me that is going to make me a better player. Not one thing. Nothing they're going to tell me is going to make me better. And he was like, what are you talking about? These are the best teachers in the world. They flew all the way here. He's paying no, not going. Tell coach, absolutely not. It's a deal breaker. Nobody's messing with my golf swing. I didn't do that. I mean, mind you, I wasn't as good as Phil in college, but I wasn't that far off. I mean, I would have been in the top 5. I think I got rated, 4th best player in the country or something. So I was, but I didn't do that. I went and listened to him. And I think that kind of belief is as rare as the talent that Phil had, I would say.
Well, I'm sorry to break away from this thrilling podcast because Brandel Chamblee really is a riveting guest, but we have to pay a few bills. So we'd like to thank our sponsor, Linksoul. They're helping make Need a Fourth possible. As you surely know, Linksoul is a clothing and a lifestyle brand. I've been wearing it for at least a decade. It's cool stuff. It's super comfy. Everyone at the Fire Pit loves it. We're believers. If you go to linksoul.com and use the promo code FirePit25, you will get 25% off your purchase. You're welcome. And we're also giving away a $250 Linksoul gift card per episode. So go to the Fire Pit YouTube channel and leave a comment from this episode and say how much you loved it, because surely you're loving it. You're a golf fan. You have to be loving this. And the winners will be notified and promoted on our Instagram and our Twitter feed. So get involved. We're trying to have some fun. We also have to pay the bills here at the Fire Pit Collective. So back to Need a Fourth. Well, so Brandel, as we're sitting here having this very pleasant chat, and you're clearly thoughtful and soft spoken and discreet, and you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings when you're talking about these instructors. I'm sure that some of the listeners are thinking, I thought Brandel was this fire breathing dragon who's like the most polarizing guy in the golf media, and I'm wondering how, this seems, I think we're getting a glimpse of who you really are right now, but how, as your persona's gotten so big and your place in the game, and how have you dealt with the blowback and the criticism and all that? Because it's something that I deal with in my professional life, Michael, a little bit, but you're more on the front lines. It feels like, is it challenging for you? Is it something you enjoy? Does it inspire you to work harder? Like, how do you deal with all of it?
Well, I tell you, in general, I'm a non-confrontational person, which I think people would find bizarre, but I am. I enjoy getting along. I enjoy people. I love people. I spend a lot of time with my friends hanging out. My caddy used to always say that he could find me on the range because it would be where the largest group of people was, because I enjoy a good laugh and I enjoy hanging out with people. The nature of my job requires me to have an opinion on things, and I sit in a spot where every 2 minutes someone turns to me and says, why did that happen? And why did somebody win? Why did somebody lose? And I've always said that the world of analysis, I mean, sports fans are very comfortable with what happened, who won. This guy hit that many fairways. Why did he win? Well, that guy made a 20-footer. Geoff Ogilvy, he chipped in at 17 and he made this unbelievable par at 18. People are very comfortable with hearing that. What pisses people off is if you try to tell them why Geoff chipped in at 17, got up and down at 18, why Jim Furyk came up short and Colin Montgomery came up short and Phil Mickelson missed the fairways. And those are hard things to divine out. They're not easy. And they're always your opinion, but as long as you're making your opinion, you should do your best to back it up in fact. So I would just say that the why tends to piss people off, but that's the world I live in. Why something happened, that's analysis to me, and it's not easy. I say all the time that by the time I come on the air, everything that could possibly be said about the golf has been said. We don't come on until the golf's over. And so there's shows in the morning and the golf all day, and then we come on. So, you sit there all day and you think, well, what hasn't been said? What's interesting to me? And how can I shed some light on it? And, you do a bit of digging, and then you try to get it right. To your point about criticism, how do I handle it? I would say that criticism is important. I don't dismiss criticism. I think we can all learn from criticism. I think there's some truth in, especially if it's, well, not especially, if it's coming from the right spot. I don't look at Twitter for criticism. I look at colleagues and friends, and I listen to tour players. Even if tour players, if they get pissed at me or they say, I was wrong, or you phrased that incorrectly, I listen to it and I think, okay, where was I coming from when I said that? And if a tour player directly confronts me, which happens a few times a year, I'll say, was I wrong? And generally what happens, I'd say 90% of the time, they're like, well, I heard you said this. And I say, well, I didn't. I said this. And I said all these things before it. And such said, I'll get you the tape. if you want to see the tape. But it happens. Golf. Being a broadcaster is not unlike being a golfer. You make mistakes. You make bogeys. You get things wrong. I have said things where I've upset people, and I thought, wow, I never saw that coming. I remember we had Rocco mediate on. We were doing this piece on Jimmy Ballard, who I quite enjoyed, Jimmy Ballard, and I could give you chapter and verse on why I think Jimmy Ballard was a marvelous teacher, in spite of his, sort of almost revolutionary ideas about, rocking and blocking. And I always called it rocking and blocking, wrongly, but I would refer to it that. I used to have a friend by the name of Dillard Pruitt, and he would always set up and he would sort of slide and squat and then slide and squat. And, like to tell you how straight he hit it, we were playing once and a mower early in the morning, and a mower had gone down the fairway and left this one strip. Okay, now how wide is that? That's 8 feet wide, maybe. The other guy in our group, Fred Wadsworth, said, "Dillard, I'll bet you $100 you can't hit that strip." And Dillard back there, he lining it up, and he had one of the Wood brothers, and it just went right down the middle and hit the damn strip. That's how straight Dillard Pruitt hit it. And so I always thought of Dillard Pruitt's golf swing as further evidence of Jimmy Ballard's theories. Hal Sutton worked with Jimmy Ballard, hit it straighter than you could point. Curtis Strange worked with Jimmy Ballard, hit it straighter than you could point. Big old guy, Leonard Thompson, didn't hit it far, but hit it damn straight. So anyway, we do this special on Jimmy Ballard. And as we're going to break, I said, yeah, he was a rocking blocker. He taught rocking and blocking, which really isn't what he taught. He taught rocking and releasing, but I said rocking and blocking, whatever. And it was a throwaway line going to break. And Rocco Mediate came in the next day, just veins popping, pissed that I had referred to in a pejorative sense his teacher as a rock and blocker. And I thought, man, I apologize. I did not mean to do that. I got a lot of respect for Jimmy Ballard, what he does. And so, yeah, I take criticism to heart. I don't dismiss it. I listen to it. I sit down every single day trying to get it right. I sit down every single day trying to do research that I get excited about, so I can share it with our viewers. It's not like I'm trying to be the tour players' friends at all. I have tried to, and it's been hard for me because I really do enjoy people and I enjoy talking golf, but I've tried to stay distant from tour players, because I want to be able to say nice things about tour players that I might not particularly like, and I want to be able to say critical things of tour players that I really like. I just don't want to be biased we all suffer from our own biases, but I try to be as objective as I can be. And one of the ways to do that, for me at least, is to do my own homework. I listen to them for sure. I go in and read all their transcripts when they talk to you, Alan, or Michael, or Geoff. I read their transcripts and I try to read between the lines and do my job. But the criticism that comes my way is just part of the job. But again, I learn from it and I don't dismiss it.
Well, before we let Brandel go, the last chance to pick his brain, Michael or Geoff, what are you cogitating on there?
Well, it would be hard to get it down to one because Brandel can go in so many different directions. But I wonder, Brandel, to get back to what Geoff was talking about early on and Alan was asking about early on. I know this will be hard to do. If you could distill it down to one thing of what you would like to do at 60, what you know now about 60, I'm sure it can't be done, but to the degree you can do it, can you distill down to one thing, what you would like to do with your golf swing at this point that you hadn't done previously?
Make as big a turn as I possibly can in both directions. There's all kinds of hurdles to that. And I look at Tom Watson, and I was lucky enough to qualify for the Senior Open another time at Royal Lytham, I think the very next year. So maybe 2019 at Royal Lytham. And I've known Tom. We certainly weren't, I wouldn't say friends, but we've always gotten along. We had mutual friends. And so I've known Tom. I've been to dinner with him a few times. I've done some outings with Tom. And Tom was warming up beside me. We both share a love of horses and all that. So he was warming up beside me, and we were the only two on the range. And so we were just talking about, I think we all know his warm-up routine. He hits balls with a 3-iron or 2-iron, his first shot of the day, never a wedge. But I was watching him stretch, and one of the things I've marveled about Tom is that even at 70 years of age, his swing was just as long as it was when he was 29. And so, that big, beautiful movement where their hands are way up here, that huge shoulder turn, that time in transition is gold. Your swing gets shorter, you've got less time in transition, and you can't sequence things up very well. And I've argued this point a lot. The guys that swing real long and have a real natural release, like Geoff Ogilvy, as a matter of fact. Geoff, I would say you hit the ball high, right? You hit the ball high, didn't you? I mean, you had a beautiful release.
I did, yeah. Not as high as I used to, but pretty high.
Yeah, you were pretty high. I mean, I just look at your golf swing, and it looked like you'd hit it very high. And it seemed to me that people who hit it high were the best wedge players, the best scramblers, and the best putters. And I've argued for years, the reason I think they're the best putters, and I'm thinking now of Ben Crenshaw comes to mind, or Seve Ballesteros comes to mind, or Tiger Woods comes to mind, or Jack Nicklaus comes to mind, and all those players hit it high. And the reason I argue that hitting it high has dividends beyond just tee to green is because if you're hitting it high, your release is generally speaking, it's not going to be a lot of forward shaft lean. You're going to be coming into the ball with a fairly neutral sort of attack angle. Of course, your hands are slightly ahead and releasing, right? But you're here. And I've always argued that the players that had a lot of forward shaft lean and a lot of supination on that left wrist, it creeps into your putting. It just creeps into it. Johnny Miller is a marvelous example. It just has a way of creeping into it. Whereas the guys who hit it high, they have this natural release with their putter. And so I would say make as full a swing as you can in both directions because it pays dividends. You have all that time in transition to allow you to sequence up. It'll allow you to, at least in my view, to carry on being a good putter and a good wedge player. What stops people from playing this game is they hurt, they can't hit it very far, they begin to get the yips because you get all kinds of gremlins in their head. So the long swing is it pays dividends in my mind. It's a real pleasure, Michael and Alan and Geoff. It's funny. I've spent as much time probably reading Geoff and listening to Geoff as I have watching him play golf. But I always look forward to what you have to say, and you've handled yourself with great class, and that's true of you guys as well, Michael and Alan. I really enjoy reading y'all. I owe a huge debt to writers. One of the things that doesn't happen as often now is, I used to just get up in the morning, get a coffee, and then get all the newspapers or periodicals, and then read them. And as you read them, you learn from writers, and it spurs you on to ideas. And now the whole world's taken to blogging, and it's harder and harder to find in-depth, wonderfully written columns. So you guys are hard at work at that, and I'm appreciative of it.
Well, in 1994, when I was an intern at Sports Illustrated, I dreamed of being a fact checker. That was a step up from being an intern, and eventually I got there. And one of the stories I had to fact check was your diary from the 1994 Masters, which Gary Van Sickle was the ghostwriter on. And as I'm sure you remember, Brandel, you played great at the start of that tournament, right? And kind of you were nibbling around, and that was probably a 8-page feature in the magazine. And I feel like that, and then you and Van Sickle collaborated on a few different pieces, and like that was kind of your entry into the golf media, if you will. I mean, you were still in your playing days, but I feel like those stories kind of launched things a little bit.
Yeah, well, when I got on tour in 1988, Gary reached out to me and asked me if I would write a once monthly column for Golf World. And so in 1988, I started writing a column about being a rookie on tour and what it was like to be a rookie. And so I kept writing for Golf World, and then I would write pieces here and there for Sports Illustrated, and I always wrote them. I always have these around. I would always write them on yellow legal pads, and I would fax the story to Van Sickle, and then he'd clean it up. But yeah, the '99 Masters is what that was. But I did
that was
write
'99.
Yeah. But I did write. I think the column that I still get a lot of people talking about is I wrote about all the free crap you get as a touring professional. I can remember when I turned pro and I got paired with this fellow named David Sutherland. You ever play with David Sutherland, Geoff? Okay, so
is he Kevin's brother?
Yeah, Kevin's brother. So he was a bit sloppy. Him would be out of his pants, shoes untied and messed up. So I got paired with him one year at Hawaii, the very first tournament of the year, and we're walking off the first tee, and his shoes are a mess. Him's out of his pants. He's a mess. And I said, David, you can call FootJoy, and they will send you a dozen pair of FootJoys. And he goes, get out of here. And I was like, no, you're on tour. They'll send you whatever you want. He said, no, they won't. I'm like, yes, they will, David. They will. So I had written a column about, like you would die for a free set of anything when you were an amateur golfer. They didn't give stuff away then. They do now, not then. You bought clubs, you bought balls, you bought shoes. But I remember, getting on tour, and 3 dozen golf balls and 5 gloves and any shoes you wanted and all the hats you wanted and all the shirts you wanted. It's like, good Lord, every day is Christmas on the PGA Tour. I get to play the best golf courses in the world, and they're paying me for this? Are you kidding me? So anyway, I wrote a column about that, and all these people wrote in because I said, I have all these shoes and I don't wear them. And they were like, well, would you send me the shoes you're not wearing? So I literally sent out 20 pairs of shoes to people that were my size. So anyway, the original point I was making was I owe a debt of gratitude to writers. So, and I do, I really do. So I enjoy y'all's work very much. So thank you for having me on. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it. I hope our paths cross at some point this year.
Yes, it was
brilliant. Thanks for coming. That was great.
Yeah, it was
thanks, Geoff. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah. So now we have a tradition, Brandel, where you're gonna leave the podcast, and we're gonna critique you as if we were Brandel Chamblee sitting in the big chair at a live from. So click the little red button there, and then we're gonna talk about your performance here. But
all right, fellas.
So yeah.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks,
cheers, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks, Brandel. That was good fun.
Wow, he was good. Good guest.
Yeah. Well done, Michael.
I think we know it wasn't me, but thank you.
Someone may have brokered it along the way, but yeah, no, but that's why I was, it's funny that I said it on the podcast, but he's obviously such a thoughtful guy, and it's funny how he's become such a lightning rod, but I think it's because he's so good at his job. I mean, like you said, his job is to give opinions, and he doesn't hold back, and that's a rarity. And as he said, it's bad. He's not just spouting off. I mean, it's grounded in his research and people he's talked to and shot link data and everything else. But when he believes something, he's all in. And that's what makes him such a good analyst.
Well, that's the job, right? I mean, like the job is to have an opinion, and he does it with research. And I know professional golfers, PGA Tour players, my peers don't generally take criticism very well. So,
No.
But that doesn't mean he shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Who doesn't tune in? I mean, I'd never watched live from, to be fair, except for at the majors, and then I watched the majors, and I think him and Nobilo have had a fantastic time going back and forward. And to hear two sensible, intelligent people, well-researched, argue the same point from each side of the argument is fantastic viewing. It's entertaining. Now McGinley's just as good. I mean, it's been a great show. It's really added to the Masters week and US Open week, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Before the coverage went away, and then we just had to kind of talk about it with our friends, but now we actually get more golf, so he's a great addition to the golf landscape, and it's nice that because he cares so much, he's a lifer.
But I feel like, for you, Geoff, as Brandel said, there's a lot of people would love to hire you as an analyst at some point, but I'm not sure you would let it rip in the same way. You're so discreet, and you seem to care so much that, it is the job, but it's not a job for everybody, right? Like it takes a certain personality type as well.
Well, I mean, I'm not gleeful in my opinion giving like some golf writers and stuff, right? Or he's not gleeful either. You feel like sometimes, I mean, Johnny loved it, didn't he?
Oh yeah.
Johnny loved sort of going down the fence, and I thought Johnny was great entertainment. Brandel seems a little more hesitant, but he still goes because he believes what he's saying. You know, I think it's interesting. I don't know. I would probably sit on the fence more than I should for that role. You know, I kind of.
Well, I mean, I think you would do, Geoff. I imagine you would do just as Brandel did. You'd find your own way at it. I mean, it was amazing when I had never thought of it this way. But you know, Alan, when you asked him the question about, well, he was talking about he's going on the air after everything's already happened. I never thought of his job that way before, and of course, but he says something very original all the time. And if Geoff did it, I think Geoff would talk about very much from his own perspective of what it's like to be a player at the highest possible levels of the game, which Brandel didn't have. At times he did, but not to Geoff's degree. So Geoff, you'd bring your own thing to it, just like, you know, Alan does his thing differently than I do my thing, but we do basically the same thing, but differently. So, you know,
it's all good. Let me keep trying to hit the ball, and we'll just do this every now and then.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that makes although, you know, I was going to say I feel this, what Brandel's saying, I feel that too. By the time I sit down to write, say, a game story for the Masters, everyone's been tweeting about it exhaustively, and Brandel's been on TV talking about it. Like, that's the challenge for you and I, Michael, is what can we give people to read at bedtime that they haven't already heard or seen? Like, it used to be, you know, you'd spend all night, your stories due the next day. It would come out in the magazine 2 or 3 days later, and some people would not have really tuned in, or they would have missed it, or they hadn't seen the highlights or whatever. But now everyone knows everything instantly. I think our jobs, I look at it the exact same way that Brandel does. Like, what can I give people they haven't already had? Because they've had a hell of a lot, even by 8 p.m. on, you know, Masters Sunday or US Open Sunday. So I relate to what he's saying. And that's the challenge in an ever crowded and faster media environment.
It's making you better.
I hope so. It definitely makes you think about things differently. You just can't write the obvious story because it's done. It's picked over. But,
yeah, I completely agree with that. You know, I say to my friend Mike Donald, we'll sometimes talk on Sunday night after a major, and I'll say to him, you know, one thing I'm not going to do, I'm not going to write the TV show, because the TV show was the TV show, and I've got to give you something that you're not going to get from the TV show. But just one quick note about Brandel and that this whole hour 15 or so that we had together. It's the golf swing and the golfer and that stationary ball. There must be an absolute magic to it, because there's so much craziness going on in the golf game, in professional golf right now, and the three of us are all very, very familiar with it. And there wasn't even a temptation really to go down that road, because we were so enjoying talking about the challenges of the game that haven't really changed. Well, I would say haven't changed at all for 400 years, which is, of course, part of the greatness of the old course, which we talked about earlier, and we'll probably always talk about. But I think it was neat for that hour 20 that we've been together that drove the whole conversation. And that's because Brandel's starting point, like it is for the three of us, is love of golf. And, you know, like I've heard from, well, just very briefly, you know, people say to me, oh, you know, you should be so grateful to Tiger. You have a job as a Tiger. With all due respect to Tiger Woods, you know, I love golf and was writing golf before Tiger, during Tiger, and now after Tiger. But it's really the game that got us before the three of us and the four of us with Brandel, with our very different backgrounds and interests and family histories and all the rest. It got us to this place, and that's incredibly neat.
That's what
absolutely.
Well, I think that's a great ending point for this need of fourth. Geoff, you have something you want to say? You look.
No. That's all good. I think like Michael hinted at, wouldn't it be great if there was one simple sort of unifying theory behind golf, and we could all just walk out there and just put it into place and hit it? But that's the point, right? It's like that. Did you watch that Stephen Hawking movie recently, where his dream was this simple, elegant equation that explained it all? You know, like
the theory
is what we're all looking for, this simple, elegant equation that explains, this unified theory that explains everything. But we're never going to find it. But that's why we play, I think. At the core, at the very, very, very core, thing is that we go and hit a golf ball and we make a move that we think is going to make the ball go one way and it goes the other way for the rest of your life, trying to work out why. Like that's.
I think you would hate that,
and
Geoff.
that's why the whole thing exists.
I think you would hate that if there was one simple theory that made golf easy, because I think the quest is what inspires you to get out of bed every day. So I don't think you would actually appreciate that if all of a sudden it got figured out and distilled.
It's the idea of trying to look for it that's the joy, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's there. If you didn't think it was there, you wouldn't bother. But maybe it's there.
All right. Well, this has been another Need a Fourth. It's always a pleasure to get together with two great minds of the game, plus Brandel this time. So, Michael, thanks for making that happen. We will be back at it again with more eclectic guests. I'm going to sign off here for Michael Bamberger and Geoff Ogilvy. This is Alan Shipnuck. This was Need a Fourth. Thank you for listening, and we'll do it again soon.
Oh my God, there's a dangerous group here.